So the direction of the game nowadays is not really about having the best heroes in the game. It's more about figuring out what the best nation you should invest in is. So in this video, I want to talk about the must-have characters for each popular faction. And if you don't have these characters, do not bother with investing in this faction because there's so much to invest in, not only with the characters, but with the signature force of that faction. You absolutely need to pick the right one or you're going to be putting your account in a really bad spot. Let's break it down. The four factions I really want to talk about here are going to be Greenland, Rachel's faction, Northbound Frosty, and Wasted Red. So those are the four factions I'm going to be talking about here today with two honorable mentions. So the two honorable mentions, Borderline 3. First one is going to be Iris. This is a splashable character you can put almost on every team. She's not an absolute staple depending on which characters you have, but she's very close to it. She's like super S tier. Reason being, she really helps other characters cut through the shields due to her passive with Wet Fog here. Removes all barriers the enemy has when the enemy uses barrier once per round. Mark when the enemy barrier is removed by the effect of Wet Fog, the defense of all enemies is increased by 20% above maximum health. Very good passive that's here to stay. Very useful. Also, Tonto here is the other splashable staple character that is very good because he provides so much survivability for the team. Mainly these two passives here, Overpower and Sword Friend. These are really good characters. I have videos about them specifically if you want to check those out, but those are going to be the two splashable characters. The main point of this video is going to be the mandatory characters for each faction. So starting with Greenland here, the two main characters you absolutely need to have on your team are going to be Bathory and Rara. First of all, the generals are always going to be staples. There's spoiler, they're always for all four of those factions. So Garth, Rachel, Shufraken, Bathory, all staples. But the combination of them with a couple other characters, some might be one character and some might be two. In this particular case in here, you're going to want to have these two characters absolutely. Oh, and then another thing I'm going to talk about, whether or not their FC is important. The FC is always better. There's never a situation where the FC is not better. The core memory alone makes the fake core just infinitely better, so always try to go for the fake core. You absolutely need Bathory, but the character you're going to want to pair with it is Rare. This is one of the biggest outliers in the game. It's just such an overloaded kit. The big thing about her is she's the fastest character of the game. Look at her attack speed here. This is at max signature force. This is signature force 2.4, so your speeds might be lower. 175 speed here. You could increase that with stuff here with the modifier. See how I have extra critical hit damage? That could have been, speed if I actually rolled speed. See, there's 2.88 speed here. You can even make her faster. And no character is ever going to come close. It's the only character they will ever have a chance of going before her is another Rara. So that's one reason why she's so good. Another reason is she really benefited from Unleashed Potential because her two moves here provide bind in the beginning. So she's always going to go first and she'll be able to pick whoever she wants to bind with her A1. And it does really good damage here. So you have this move here, 300% damage to one enemy, 1 mana, reduces the target's accuracy and evasion by 100, which is absolutely insane. Then grants herself status effect immunity to self for 12 turns. Then Bite, if you are marked with Tranquil, so marked meaning if you have Bathory's passive Tranquil, deals 50% additional damage for each mana your target has. That alone is one of the craziest moves in the entire game. Then on top of that, you're adding Unleashed Potential special binds, gain mana effect on the target for 2 turns when the attack hits, can't be removed. So this move is always going to hit, it's going to reduce accuracy, is going to give herself status effect immunity. It's just like, and it binds them. It's just absolutely an insane ability, one of the best in the entire game. And she's always going to go first to make sure she could get that off. So a very good move there. Then she also has this AoE that hits super hard because of the passive she's getting with the Unleashed Potential with gains additional 1,000 piercing damage when attacking an enemy. On top of that, it's a burst move. So the more mana you have is going to do extra damage and then deals 124% piercing damage to all enemies, and then reduces accuracy and evasion on the target with the highest attack by 100. And it also has bite, so it's going to be getting 50% additional damage for each mana. So it's almost like a double burst move. It binds everyone. And it says binds gain mana effects on the target, but you choose someone, but it's binding everyone. It's an AoE bind, which is hilarious. Very good ability there. You could do that on the first turn if you could bind her with Annie. So those two alone, always going to need those two characters. Don't even think about going Greenland if you don't have both of those guys. So then next is going to be Rachel's faction here. And the major characters you're going to need, I would say 3 characters you absolutely need for this faction. You're going to need Rachel, obviously. And then ideally you're going to need his fake core. And the fake core you're going to want to have is actually both of them. You're going to want his main fake core and you're going to want to have his blue fake core just purely for stats on the back end. And how that works is right here. Blue fake core, see, providing this is the fusion amount. You could get even more stats here, but that's going to be the main reason why you want the blue fake core is to just provide stats to that whole nationality. So then the main characters you're going to want to have with him are going to be Rachel, and you're going to want want April. I would say that's absolutely mandatory. You don't even think about this team, period. But the other character you're going to want is Baraka. And you're going to want Baraka more so than Xeon because he kind of activates himself. He does enough damage by himself that he's just a better choice. If you see my video on Baraka, he double dips with blue fake wars. He gets a ton of stats. He does a billion damage. He's just absolutely amazing. He's faster than Xeon. He's an incredible character that absolutely is essentially mandatory for this team, in my opinion. First one is going to be April, and the reason why April is mandatory is going to be she kind of unlocks the team and makes them actually really viable, which is this passive here. Disheartened front row enemies receive 40% increased damage, and all damage against the targets are applied as piercing damage. If you think about all the popular meta units, Tauntalo, Iris, Ramj, all those characters are very tanky. Illum's up there. Like of these front row characters, Shufraken is another one. Garf is up there as well. So all those characters in the front line are so tanky and so hard to get through. Being able to have disheartened front row enemies receive 40% increased damage, and all damage against them is applied as piercing damage actually makes it possible for you to actually burn through those frontline characters and start to disrupt the team and then eventually win the game. And then a couple other side things is at the beginning of the round, reduces received damage by 10% for each living ally except the caster. I think that synergizes really well with the healer because they're going to want to target her and get her out of there. And then also heals 100% health to all allies upon dying. Probably going to be targeted, and then is actually able to heal people even when she's taken out. And then hopefully you guys have survived enough and done enough damage to actually win the game. Absolutely amazing character. Then also has some utility too. Attacks damage to all enemies. Flicks target with silence for 6 turns if the target is disheartened. Another thing that's really impactful. Only thing is it's going to be kind of tough to get that off because of how slow she is. Lastly, heals all allies by 19% of on maximum health. And then heals 10% additional for each man on the target, which is very unique. A solid heal. Nothing too crazy. Talia is definitely a better healer, but definitely very good. Baraka, for this faction, he's an assassin that needs to do a ton of damage and does it really well. So he has a ton of stats because he's double dipping in both blue fig cores. He got the core memory now, so he actually has a ton of stats. This is where he's at now without any unleashed potential. This is 30% core memory and bad gear, and he already has 5k health. Crazy, he's going to hit like an absolute truck, and then he's going to do a ton of damage with a 525% damage to one enemy. And the big thing here on both of his moves, he has this really unique move here where it's Plunder. Steals 1 mana from the target and grants 2 mana to a back row ally if the target is disheartened. So I think that's really good synergy with Rachel, and especially for a fast character to be able to steal mana in the beginning of the match is going to be a really big deal and could really change how the match ends up going in your favor. For this faction, those are the 3 characters that I think are mandatory. Okay, now we have Northfront Frosty. So this faction is going to be Shufraken and Valentina. This is an absolute really scary combo that is normally inhibited by how many stats you could put on Valentina. If you can make her survive, you win the game, essentially is how this matchup works. Best way to do that is you just need to have as much stats as possible on her. This is a very expensive team to invest in, but very beneficial if you could actually get there. Because the things that they don't have going for them are speed is usually an issue for them, but they have the absolute most game-changing move in the game, which is this at their disposal. So it's kind of like you sacrifice having initiative, but if they don't get rid of you, you're going to have the absolute biggest game-changing move to be able to win the game with, which is this. It's her A2 here, deals 525% damage to one enemy, a contempt, mana burn, 10 mana, all enemies afflicted with Fear of the Abyss if the target is afflicted with Fear of the Abyss, and binds gain mana for 7 turns. So you look at these other binds that are on Unleashed Potential, those only last 2 turns, and they don't remove the mana actively. The only one was Plunder, but that was 1 mana. So imagine this swing here where you're doing not only a ton of damage, probably killing the guy, 525% damage on a 3 mana move, that's just as strong as Baraka's. Then you're taking away 10 mana from everyone, and you're binding them for 7 turns. So if you don't win the match after that, then you're just massively undergeared or misplaying or something like that. Like that right there is the win now button. The only drawbacks to it when it came out was character stats were not high enough to survive this ever. So it used to be the reason why she wasn't considered amazing in God tier when she came out was in the beginning, she came out, everyone's stats were too low. So Rara would just go first with Annie and one shot the whole team. It'd be Annie plus Shufraken. They would just one shot the team. So she looked horrible. And another thing too is because the meta was so fast, she's a water character. You have irises on every team. She can't go unless someone else goes before her. So you needed to pair her with some kind of way of being able to clear the frost resistances, then you go and then the match is over. You know, Sully Bath 3 would be a good way to clear it. Characters are just so survivable. Now, you don't need to actually clear it in one go. You could maybe clear it and go the next turn kind of thing. It's not imperative that you do it immediately or you absolutely lose kind of thing. The addition of Awakening and Unleash Potential has really made her more viable. Also Core Memory too. She's scales well with survivability. Regardless of survivability, no one's going to come back from her move going off. That's the only thing that matters. And so since she's slow, she needed that survivability to actually ensure that that thing gets off. So that's the main thing about those two. I would say those are the absolute two that you need on the team. Yes, you could argue Ramj, and Ramj is a very good character. I wouldn't say he's necessary. This team, if I didn't have these two, it's like, what's the point? I'll just go with a different team. Like, that's what makes them work. Whereas Ramj is just a good character that you could put him on almost any team. So he's very useful, but not mandatory. There's a whole bunch of other options. I'll go more in depth on these teams if you guys want me to, and make a video on each specific team, and we could talk about what characters are going to be best solved for them. But for this video, I just want to talk about the absolute two most important characters on this for Northrend Frosty team, and I would say it's Shufrakin and Valentina, and then everyone else is optional. Now let's talk about Wasted Red. Most important characters for Wasted Red. Obviously, the first one is going to be FC Rudely. Not just normal Rudely, FC Rudely. The whole point on this team, for the most part, is you're going to need the A2 of FC Rudely here. This is one of the major things. Is kind of like, it not on the level of the A2 of Valentina, but very close. It's a very impactful move that could help you win it overtime, and it's just a really good move just in general. Also, I would say a very important character on this team, I would say this is a trio here that you're absolutely going to need, is going to be FC Annie. And the reason why FC Annie is so good is that Ridley is going to be your main person on the side. It's just from my experience, when I play against this team, if they don't have Annie, I find it so much easier to beat this team. I think Annie is right up there with Ridley as one of the most important characters on this team. So these are going to be the three main characters. You need FC Annie, not just normal Annie, and not just normal Ridley. You need the FC versions of these guys, or don't even think about running this team. It just pairs too well together. I would say Wasted Red is kind of slept on, but a very good team that I think does well against a lot of the top arena teams. I think right now everything gets overshadowed by Greenland, but all of these teams are really good and could all take games off Greenland. Like, it's not like Greenland is like god tier and then everyone else is under it and you kind of have to play it right. It's like each team has their own matchups and all of them could beat Greenland. They all kind of beat each other in their own way. It's just not that many people have a good enough investment in these other rosters or these other teams to be able to compete with some of these monster Greenland teams. Just based on how the order of all these characters came out, it just makes sense that a majority of people have Rara and Bathory all invested in, and these other teams are kind of neglected a little bit. Okay, so that's gonna be it for this video. Those are the mandatory characters for each faction that I wanted to talk about in this video. Let me know in the comments below if you agree, disagree, if you have any questions in particular on these teams here. And with that, guys, I am out. Peace.